he'd done the night before, and always getting ribbed by wrestling and stuff. The Nasty Boys, they seem like utter pricks for what they did. He tells a story about with was it Los Gringos with Art. They was on a tour with the Nasty Boys, and they had in Japan, but they had a hair versus hair match coming up when they got back to Mexico, and everyone knew it. Everyone knew they had a hair versus mask match. Sorry, and Los Gringos were going to lose, so they had to get their head shaved. And the Nasty Boys, they shaved Art's head, or they shaved a little bit of it, so Art had to get his hair cut off, so it didn't look stupid, obviously. But that goes further than ribbing, because you know it was Art's livelihood on the line. He had to lose his hair. You know, people think, oh, that's funny, yeah, the Nasty Boys cut his hair. No, that's serious business. You know, Art probably were going to lose money after that. I mean, imagine if he got back to Mexico and they said, what are you doing? You can't cut your hair. You're in mask versus hair match. You need long hair for this. That's money he'd be losing. So, yeah, he doesn't speak too badly about them. He doesn't speak personally bad about them. But you just get an insight to how much of a dickhead the Nasty Boys were. One thing I like about Eddie, though, is he had his chance to get back at the Nasty Boys. The Nasty Boys, one of them was passed out in a bar. They had the shaver there. You know, he had a chance to get his revenge on the Nasty Boys for shaving his eyebrows off, but he didn't. You know, that just shows what the kind of guy that Eddie is. He don't give a, you know, sure, you'd be a dickhead, you'd do that to him, but he didn't care about revenge. And that just shows you what kind of a guy Eddie is. Into his time in WCW, this is what I found funny. Obviously WCW was giving him a good break, but we all know what kind of dickhead WCW was, especially Kevin Nash. You know, Eddie Guerrero's story about Kevin Nash is, I never knew Kevin Nash was such of a dickhead. You know, I don't know all the stuff about WCW. I'm buying the rights and follow WCW, so I've got a very brief knowledge of WCW. But my God, Kevin Nash just seems like an utter prick. And looking back at it, looking at some of the videos, I can see it. I mean, Kevin Nash ended Goldberg's 170-odd winning streak. He was the guy who unmasked Rey Mysterio, and that's just things he did on TV. Obviously, he only cared about putting himself over, and he just seemed like such a dickhead. Goldberg, in Eddie's book, Eddie says that Goldberg was actually a top-notch guy, but in WCW he got talking to the wrong crowd, you know, just the wrong people speaking to him. I mean, they even had a locker room for the main event as little boys, and then the other talent. That just seemed like, that just showed you what kind of a bad place WCW was. But one of the funny things is, he says Vince Russo came in to help WCW. Vince Russo and another former WWF writer came into WCW, and everyone in the back were like, yes, this is it, they know what they're doing, obviously they didn't. But the funniest line in Eddie's book, the funniest line is this. Vince Russo, for some reason, Vince Russo had an obsession with pole matches. I mean, you've seen him in TNA. Obviously, he's got his pole matches. But I just can't believe that Russo was... The way he talks about Russo is the exact same about what I know about him now. So, no, that's a different video for a different time, but this just tells me how much of a dickhead Russo was. You know, he knows nothing about booking. He's not a dickhead personally, sorry, but he knows nothing about booking. And the exact same mistakes Eddie described that Russo made in WCW, I can see them now in TNA. That's another video for another time, but Russo does not know what he's doing, quite frankly. So yeah, in WCW, tells some good stories about his matches with the luchadors and stuff like that. And then also in this book you can see the bonds he makes with some of the wrestlers like Dean Malenko and Chris Benoit, and how much he cares about Chavo and stuff like that. You can just see how much of a love and respect they had between each other, and he just tells some really good stories about it. And especially when Eddie was going through his drug problems, you can see how good of a friend Chris and Dean were to help him through that and stuff, and all the stuff they did. They never judged Eddie for what he was going through, and it just showed you how good of a guys that they were. Even Jim Ross and some other guy, they knew what he was going through, and it was this close to firing him, but they decided to give him another chance. But unfortunately Vince got wind of Eddie's problems, and that's when Eddie got fired. And it also shows you how good of a wife Vickie is. All the shit that she had to put up with Eddie, she helped him through it and stuff like that. And then when she had enough and when they wanted to get a divorce, it really shows you that there was definitely some powers that be upstairs that came into Eddie's life and helped him through a lot of stuff. Because I reading this book, there's some points that I can't believe that Eddie got through that and stuff like that. I mean, he says in this book, normally with a divorce it's over fast, but Vickie didn't divorce him straight away, and that gave him time to get his life together and show Vickie that he could change it all around, which he did. And then obviously they got back together. That just tells me that there's got to be some powers that be up there that brought them together. I'm not saying God or anything like that. I'm not a religious person, but I'm definitely saying something was there. That wasn't just luck, that wasn't just coincidence. But yeah, Eddie puts a lot of his accomplishments down to God in this book, which I can respect. As I said, I'm not a religious person, but if he believes there's something there, and that got him through a lot, so it's all good. It didn't do any harm anyway. Also in this book, I can see how he got the title. How he survived all his drug problems and shit like that. The car crash that he had, which, by the way, in the DVD what I've got, he tells a brief story of the car crash. He tells about a 5 or 10 minute segment for the car crash, but in this book he really goes into detail of what happened and the story after it, and how close he came to dying. He was in the emergency room, and when Vickie came into the not in the emergency room, sorry, in the hospital, and when Vickie came into the emergency room, the doctor said, look, we don't think he's got much time, so that so it really tells a good story. It really goes in depth. Everything you heard in the DVD where you thought, oh man, that's a good story, that's a good story, I'd like to hear more. This book, it describes everything. Everything you wanted to hear about it. On the DVD, if there's ever been a moment where you thought, oh, I want to hear more of that, this book will tell you more of that. So yeah, this book I highly recommend it. I'm going to introduce a new book rating system. Let's say 10 out of 10. I'm going to give this book a 8. Because it's a very good story, very good in depth, but I just think he's holding back on his stories about the WWE, because I know so much about the WWE, and it doesn't sound as good as Eddie describes in this book. And I'm not saying it's not, but I think he's holding back on the bad about WWE a little bit. He, like in WCW, he tells the stories about the arseholes backstage. In this book, You know, he doesn't say anything about the arsehole backstage. I mean, you know Triple H is an arsehole backstage. You know Randy Orton is an arsehole backstage. You know there is arseholes backstage, but he doesn't really say anything about arseholes backstage in WWE. One line that really got to me, and you know, I just had to stop reading for about 5 minutes in this book, just thinking about it, and even drew a bit of a tear. When he was going through his drug problems, Dean and Chris, I'm not sure if it was just one of them, but one of them said to Eddie,